Good evening, Dr. Ulrich. We are live with the community to get us started for the Power Hour.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody who has taken the opportunity to join us this evening, specifically on this Power Hour about Prop R. And you well know that Power Hours are just one of the ways that we work to ensure that our community has the information that they need, specifically surrounding the goings-on of the Kirkwood School District. My name is David Ulrich, and I'm the superintendent of the Kirkwood School District. And the first thing that we're going to do this evening is introduce the senior leadership team, the group I work with most closely every day on behalf of our students here in Kirkwood. So I'm going to call their name and ask them to please say their name and then introduce themselves and basically give their role for the district. So I'll start with Dr. Matt Bailey.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Bailey. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, and I'm also facilitating the Boundary Adjustment Committee.
Ms. Steph Dietrich.
Hello, I'm Steph Dietrich. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the district, and I manage the communications that go out to our families in our community.
Dr. Howard Fields.
Good evening, everyone. Howard Fields, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources here in the Kirkwood School District.
All right, Dr. Brian Painter, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, is away on with a different assignment and a different obligation this evening that is related to the work that we have in our district. And so I'll now go to Mike Romay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Romay, Chief Financial Officer. I also assist with overseeing construction.
Thank you very much for being here. And then I'm going to call out the other folks that we have on our panel this evening. And I will go around and I'll ask Dr. Dana Liberton to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I am Dana Liberton. I'm the principal at North Kirkwood Middle School.
Dr. Mandy Rose.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mandy Rose, and I'm the principal at Kirkwood Early Childhood Center.
All right. Dr. Ricker.
Hi, Bo Ricker. I have the pleasure of serving the students and the staff at Westchester.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us this evening. We greatly appreciate the time that you've devoted to this. As we know that Prop R will affect all of our schools. In fact, I think it's best that we start with a brief summary of what Prop R has meant to our district so far. And just a reminder, Prop R was approved by the voters in April of 2021. And those funds generated will provide additional classrooms, security upgrades, and accessibility improvements at all of our schools. And that was one of the things that we promised our community, was that all of our schools would be positively affected by Prop R. But mostly, we wanted to make sure that we increased capacity for our current needs that we have, and you'll hear about some of those, and the pressure that we have on the system. And then, of course, for the growth that we are expecting consistently, even through COVID. Our demographers are telling us we can expect modest growth of anywhere between 3 to 5% over the next 5 years. And so the public support that we got, the overwhelming support, if you'll recall, 66% of our voters supported the Prop R effort that we had a year ago. So we're obviously very excited about that. And anytime we have the opportunity, we want to say thank you to our community for your trust and support of our school district. So I'm going to ask Mr. Romay to talk a little bit about the work that we've done so far. You may not know it, but we've got a significant amount of work that's been done already on our Prop R projects. Mr. Romay, would you summarize those for us?
Yes, thanks. We have completed some projects. Most of them were completed last summer or early fall, but they include HVAC units at Kirkwood High School, Kaiser, North Glendale, and Tillman. So we replaced some older units at those 4 schools. We created a secure entrance and vestibule at North Glendale Elementary. That was the last school that in our district that did not have a secured entrance. And then at Kirkwood High School, we created a new security office on the Essex side of campus. We are also planning on constructing a new main office on the Doherty Ferry side. And so currently the main office is in the middle of the campus. So we will be moving that main office to the Doherty Ferry side of campus. Those existing main offices will then be converted to classrooms. But once this is complete, we'll have administration and security on both ends of the campus, Essex and Doherty Ferry. Then we also built ADA ramps in the front entrance of North Glendale and Robinson Elementary Schools, just to improve access to those schools. And then at Westchester Elementary, they are over 100% capacity at that school. So we had to have some additional classrooms done quickly. And so this past fall in September, we started a 2-classroom addition at Westchester Elementary, and we just recently completed that work in February. So that was phase 1 of Westchester. Phase 2 will include additional classrooms on the backside of Westchester Elementary. And so I had mentioned that we created ADA ramps at North Glendale and Robinson. That work was recently completed, and it's great to have these. It's before having this, any students or parents, any visitors that have a disability would have to enter through the back of the building. So it was critical to have a welcoming and ADA access to the front of this school and Robinson. And so that work was done in the fall. Both of these ramps opened in late fall, early winter.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Romay. I very much appreciate that. Next, I'm going to ask Dr. Ricker to discuss the classroom addition that have already happened, and then with phase 1, and then what that will mean for your kids currently. And then, of course, a little bit how we're going to work on phase 2.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we were very grateful that Prop R was passed by our community. Great support. We were in a little of a bind last year with the number of students that we have and the number of classrooms that we had. And unfortunately, we had to have art and music on a cart. So the addition of those 2 classrooms down there in the green added a art and music room for our teachers beginning in March. So that was greatly appreciated. It's really changed how we've been able to deliver the curriculum in the music and the art classrooms, because now they have a space to store things. Before, they were creating projects and doing things and having to store them in the classroom. Now they have a space that's very specific to each one of those special areas. Art has a great space to be able to store their instrument, or excuse me, music has a great space to store their instrument, and art has a great place to store their projects, things that they might be working from class to class. So it's greatly impacted the flow of our building. We don't have a lot of people walking around classrooms. Students get to move from classroom to classroom, get to have a little bit of exercise and movement break, which is nice. And again, the second phase is what's going to be changed in yellow. And we're going to be adding 8 new classrooms. We'll be losing 3 classrooms to build a brand new library that will bring our library up to the standards of all the other elementary schools in the Kirkwood School District. And all the purple areas are going to be repurposed areas. So our cafeteria will get larger. We will recoup the old library. We'll have a space where we'll be able to deliver intervention and have a collaborative space for our interventionists. So we're very excited about what's going to take place. We are continuing to grow. We understand that we are going to have to go through a little bumps next year with the space that we may have, determining on the number of kids that come in. And we still encourage everyone to continue to register and be a part of, become a Westchester Wildcat. But we're grateful that that addition will be done at the end of not this summer, but next summer. So we'll be ready for that school year. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel for us. We're looking forward to our new spaces. And we're looking forward to our kids get to see the entire construction process, as that might be one of the things that they might want to pursue as a career in the future.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ricker. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Romay to talk about what our community can expect even as soon as this summer.
Yes, so this summer we're planning interior renovations at Kaiser, Robinson, and North Glendale Elementary Schools, and then also at Kirkwood Early Childhood Center. So at Kaiser, we are building a new vestibule on the northeast side of the building. That will be their ADA access into the building. There's an elevator right there. We will also be upgrading some of their restrooms. At Robinson, we will be building a new restroom and upgrading some of their restrooms. But we will also be installing a new elevator at Robinson. North Glendale, we had moved the main office to the front of the building, so we are going to renovate the old main office. We're also going to make some restroom renovations at that school as well. And then at KCC, their main office was also moved to the front of the building. So we are doing renovations to the old main office. And then we're also going to install a canopy around the back and sides of the building that will give some protection to families as they're picking up and dropping off students at Kirkwood Early Childhood Center.
Excellent. Thank you again, Mr. Romay. And speaking of KECC, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rose to discuss a little bit more detail about the renovations that'll be happening there.
Thank you. Our KECC team is certainly grateful for the improvements made possible by the passage of Prop R. In recent weeks, the focus has been on completion of our interior improvements. These improvements included relocation of the main office, a new classroom space, and an additional meeting room. The relocation of the main office really benefited our students from a safety lens. We're now able to see the parking lot and actually engage in best practice around visitor management. In terms of our additional classroom space, we are going to house our intensive speech program in that space, which allows it to occur without any disruptions in terms of delivery of instruction. And then Mr. Romay just touched upon we also had an addition of a meeting room, which was very much needed. We have a campus that has a staff of 88. And so we were really, in a tough spot regarding having meeting spaces to have important meetings with families and problem solve around students. So we're really grateful to have that as an addition at our campus. And lastly, coming up soon is that canopy that I know Mr. Romay just touched upon. Our families drop off at our campus and pick up daily. And they often have multiple kiddos with them and they're carrying items. And at these past 2 years, they've just been navigating inclement weather as they're approaching their child's exterior classroom door. And now they're going to have that covered awning or canopy that's just really going to make their arrival and departures more seamless and allow them to focus on, meeting their kiddos' needs and engaging with teachers as a part of that process. So we are really grateful about the positive impact that we're experiencing as a result of these improvements.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Rose. And Mr. Romay, would you discuss a little bit about the security work that's going to happen and then give us an update on the construction bid timeline?
Yes, I will. So this summer, we also have planned security camera and exterior lighting improvements. So Prop R did include funds to address safety and security. And so this summer, we will be installing roughly around 200 additional cameras. That pretty much doubles the number of cameras that we have throughout the school district. And then we will also be upgrading exterior lighting at all of our campuses. So that's going to happen, start this summer and should conclude this fall. And then our construction timeline, for any time we do a construction project, we go through a competitive bidding process that requires us to advertise for the bids and then collect sealed bids. And then once we collect the sealed bids and we do an analysis, then we make a recommendation to the board, and the board awards the contract to the lowest qualified bidder during a public board meeting. And so this past December, the projects that I mentioned that are upcoming this summer, Kaiser, Robinson, North Glendale, and KECC, we went through a bidding process, opened bids back in December, and we're pleased that the bids came in $500,000 under budget. So that was great. Things kind of had changed over the past few months with escalating costs and really just the labor market. And it's just been kind of hard on contractors to be able to staff and get materials. And so when we opened bids for the Kirkwood High School, Knifer, and North Middle School in March, we only received one bid, and that one bid was significantly over budget. So because of that, we rejected that one bid, and then we had conversations with our construction management team and our maintenance staff to come up with a new plan. And if you could switch. And so we were really transparent about that. We communicated that to our board and our families. The whole goal all along has been to keep our promises and make sure we can address our classroom capacity. So as we work through a plan to address these problems that we were seeing with supply chain and labor challenges, we came up with an updated construction timeline. And if you can switch. And so you see the previous timeline and then the current timeline. So at North Middle, previously we were going to finish that project in July, this summer in July. But what we heard from contractors is there was just no way that they could even get some of the materials that they needed by July. Some of the lead times on some of these materials are 6 to 9 months. So we had to give additional time. And so from working with our advisors, we determined that we needed to give until August of 23 to complete that project. And then for Knifer Middle, Kirkwood High School, and Tillman Elementary, we extended all of those from July of 23 to October of 23. The one project that we did not change the timeline is Westchester Elementary. So that was scheduled to be completed in July of 23, and that same timeline, we're keeping that same timeline. And the reason for that is Westchester is already over capacity. And so we can't wait any longer for the additional classrooms at that school. So those are the revised timeline. It did help. We collected additional bids. And so, for example, at Tillman, for the Tillman and Westchester project, we collected 4 bids, came in at $22 million. We also collected 4 bids for Kirkwood High School, Knifer, and North Middle, and that came in at $24.7 million. So as I had mentioned, when we bid this project for the high school, Knifer North, in March, we only collected 1 bid. And by extending that timeline, we increased the number of bids, but we also saved about $1.5 million. The previous bid was over $26 million. So by changing those timelines, although it's upsetting, it did help with getting these projects closer to budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Romay. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Liberton about the impact that that will have at North Kirkwood Middle School. Obviously, that's not the best news we wanted to hear, but as Mr. Romay said, we want to make sure that we're keeping our promises. So, Dr. Liberton, would you describe a little bit about what folks can expect to see through the changes at North Kirkwood Middle School?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we would have all loved to have seen all of these changes to start next school year. But it's okay. Like, we will get what we need. And we're going to make things work. We've been making it work for a long time. And yeah, I think we're just really excited. We're really excited that we didn't have to cut back on the things that we know we need for our building. We just had to be a little flexible for a little longer. And I don't know if the last couple of years has taught any of us anything, it's that we can all be much more flexible than we ever thought we could. So yeah, we're okay. I think all of the schools are just really fortunate that our community came through and decided to make this happen for us. And yeah, so I mean, it does mean for us that during next school year, I really don't know what that's going to look like. So we'll have to wait and see, but we're just excited. And kind of what Dr. Ricker spoke about, I don't know, there's a part of me that thinks it's a little cool that some of the work will be going on while we have students there, because I'm excited to see some of our kids watch it in action. And I don't know, it is all going to end up being just fine and so cool in the end. And to be honest with you, right now with the district office being vacant, we use it all the time right now. So we're taking advantage of some extra space right now. I can only imagine how great it's going to be when the extra space is fixed up and how we need it to be. So it'll be great.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Liberton. And back to Mr. Romay. You want to discuss a little bit about the finances?
Yes. So all the Prop R projects have been approved or they've been completed and will start this summer, with the exception of the expansion and renovation of the facilities building. We haven't issued bids for that work yet, but we will be soon. And what that does is it expands and renovates that building. But all the other projects, again, they've either been completed or they will start this summer. And that includes the 5 schools that are going to have major additions and renovations. And that's the 2 middle schools, the high school, Westchester, and Tillman. So we're pleased to be able to say that. We do know that we have to continue to monitor the budget closely, including the contingency funds. We will do that. The contingency fund, that's anytime you do any construction work, you carry a contingency just in case there's some kind of problems or any unforeseen issues that come up. So we'll continue to watch that closely because we know that costs continue to rise, and so we will watch the budget closely.
All right, thank you again, Mr. O'May. And next, I know one of the things that we've talked about really since all the way back with Prop S is the idea that we would have to do a boundary work and boundary adjustment. And I know many of our parents are watching that very closely and have questions with regard to how this will in fact impact the boundary adjustment work. We have had to change some timelines. So we definitely wanted to give Dr. Matt Bailey, who is heading up that work, the opportunity to really give some background and give some updates on what our parents can expect. Dr. Bailey?
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, just kind of taking everybody back to the genesis of our adjustment committee. After Prop S did not pass, whether it had passed or not, we were going to have to look at our boundary adjustment process. And so even back then, we solicited volunteers and asked that anybody that wanted to join the committee could. And we got over 100 parents, grandparents, community members, private school parents, people that were considering changing schools, just a wide variety of people that joined. And then we realized that we needed to have a little bit more focus on some equity and diversity. And so we invited our Task Force for Equity team to join. And so our Boundary Adjustment Committee is approximately 150 people that have been working since 2020, really, on different areas. And we zeroed in on multiple scenarios and questions that we wanted to answer before we ever even looked at any kind of map. And a lot of those questions involved focusing on building capacity rather than equalizing enrollment, trying to continue or discontinue the Tillman split, look at ways that we could provide opportunities for families to continue in their school if the adjustment occurred while they were in school, and processing many, many different questions that we had. And then specifically, we also looked at our current Meacham Park boundaries. Many people may not be aware that the Meacham Park area is divided into 3 different school boundaries: Westchester, North Glendale, and Robinson. And we wanted to make sure that we talked to those families specifically. And so we've engaged with families in a broad spectrum. We've also talked with Meacham Park Neighborhood Association. We've talked to several current parents, former parents, grandparents, longtime community members to get lots of input on the Meacham Park in particular and what those boundaries could look like. Process-wise, we've engaged with a consulting firm that does this work nationally, has worked with dozens and dozens of school districts doing boundary work across the nation, and really have started the process of putting together some map pieces. And what that process looks like is the first thing that we do is we take all of the data that we have available to us, which would include current enrollment, socioeconomic status of all of our students, and our current boundaries. And then we overlay projected enrollment, projected density of enrollment areas, and all the different data points, including things like new construction and transiency and anything else that we can, and create what are called planning blocks. And so the consultant firm at this moment has taken our current boundaries and divided up all of those boundaries into planning blocks, and they're very much like puzzle pieces. And so right now we've got hundreds of puzzle pieces that may be constituting 2 or 3 blocks or a subdivision or natural boundaries like streets and railroad tracks. And those planning blocks each have all the demographic data of the people that live in that block contained within it. Our Boundary Adjustment Committee, up until tomorrow, actually has been able to give feedback on those planning blocks and make suggestions as to whether or not we should shift from one street to another street, or if we should divide a larger planning block into a smaller block, basically so that we can get as many puzzle pieces as we can and be very specific about what we have in each of those pieces. The next phase will be taking all those puzzle pieces and starting to shift some things around based on different scenarios. And so we won't just put a map up. Each map that we take a look at will be based on a different scenario. If it's based on walkability or the physical distance from houses to the school, or balancing out enrollment in a couple schools, we'll have a variety of demographic pieces that we can focus on for those scenarios. And then the company will sit with the company as the administrative team, take all the feedback that we've gotten from our Boundary Adjustment Committee, all the feedback we got on those puzzle pieces, and they'll start moving some of those pieces around. And it's very easy. They got it loaded in a database, and it's as simple as, for example, clicking on R12, which might be Robinson puzzle piece 12, and moving that to Tillman, or moving T7 to Glendale, or doing all those different pieces and in shifts so that we can see how that would impact the enrollment, how that would impact the demographics of each of those buildings, how that would impact the walkability. Is it separating neighborhoods? Is it separating across natural boundaries? And we'll create multiple scenarios. And we're engaging with PTOs and staff meetings, and we'll be able to present several of those scenarios to our community for multiple opportunities of feedback. And we won't take anything to the Board of Education until at least August, and we've had multiple opportunities for community engagement and feedback on that. And then no boundary adjustments will actually go into effect until at the earliest the school year after next, so that 23-24 school year, but it will also be tied in with when construction is finished. And so if construction takes longer than we anticipate, those boundary adjustments won't go into effect until that construction is finished. And then we also want to make sure our families are still aware that our district is committed to providing opportunities for what we call waivers, so that they could start at a school, and if their household falls in an area that a boundary gets adjusted, they could finish at the school that they start. So our boundary adjustment process will take many, many years. But as Dr. Ulrich has said, and we've said many times, we have not done this in Kirkwood for close to 50 years. There are generations of families that have not had to change schools. This is a big deal, and we want to make sure that we not only do a lot of engagement, but that we're very transparent with our process, transparent even down to the minute details of getting feedback on those puzzle pieces like we talked about, so that the community can be fully engaged. And we want to make sure that we present those scenarios and those opportunities for the Board of Education to look at a map that has gotten a lot of community input. So we're continuing that process. No final boundaries would go to the board until at least August. And again, then we would have at minimum one school year after that before any boundaries would take effect.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Bailey. And before I go to questions, or excuse me, before I go to communicating and who you would reach out to, Ms. Dietrich, do we have any questions that have been submitted tonight?
Sure, and I also want to just kind of put in a thought. If folks want to learn more about our boundary adjustment process, we did just release a podcast that can be accessed at kirkwoodschools.org/KSD Talks, where individuals can learn a little bit more about boundary adjustments. We had a conversation with Dr. Bailey and Dr. Ulrich to talk a little bit about that process and provide an update. And actually the podcast we did just a few weeks ago was about Prop R. So if folks want to learn more beyond what we've talked about tonight, there's some additional resources there as well. But moving on to some of the questions that we received in advance of this meeting, I think that one of the questions that came up was specific to phases of construction. This question was specific to phases at Tillman, but I think it leads to kind of the wider question of how do we decide and coordinate what part of construction happens at what time? So Mr. Romay, can you give us a sense of some of the phases of construction, maybe specifically at Tillman, but on a broader sense as well?
Yes, thanks. We work with our design team and our construction management firm and the contractor to determine the phasing. And we often try to do any maintenance or construction during the summer months when kids are not here. But when you have major construction happening, it takes much longer than 2 or 3 months during the summer. So in order to keep kids safe, staff safe, and also just to be able to keep the school open, you have to do different phases. And so we will do that. Again, we'll work with the design team and our construction management firm to determine that. But for example, at Tillman and Westchester, the first thing that they're going to start on is the site work that they have to do. So there's both of those two schools will receive some parking lot improvements. And so that's going to be the first thing that they're going to start this summer before moving to the building additions. But even when they're doing the building additions, for example, at the high school, I had mentioned that we're moving the main office. We're creating a new main office at the front of the building. So that has to happen first before we can, and be completed before we can move the existing staff that are using those offices up front to be able to then come back and renovate them into classrooms. So there's phasing like that has to happen. A lot of work that they do is with the intent of keeping everybody safe. So, and also to minimize disruption. So there will be times where they may have to schedule any work that's going to be loud to happen when school's not in session, or over a break, like winter break. There's also times where, you know, they may have to be moving heavy HVAC units. And so they'll schedule those at a time when nobody's around as well. So there's a lot of phasing that goes into all of these projects, mainly because we have to operate as a school while construction is happening. So safety is a big concern. Any of the construction zones will be fenced off to keep kids and just anybody out of those areas, just to keep everybody safe.
And I do kind of want to expand on that point, Mr. O'May, and talk to some of our building folks. When it comes to sort of communicating with your students and your families to sort of manage some of that and make sure they know when construction is happening, what areas of the building might be accessible or not accessible due to construction, just to kind of keep our students safe. What kind of planning and thoughts go into that? I'll probably ask Dr. Ricker first, since he's got some experience, and then maybe ask Dr. Liberton a little bit, since she's looking down the road at it too.
No, I think that's a great question. You know, some things that we did to kind of get ahead of some of those questions that might happen. I know when we had construction that was planned, we were going to pour a staging pad for the 2-room addition that we had. So it was going to take up the soccer field, obviously communicating with the kids, our PE teachers, as well as our families. But also we went and put leaflets on all the doors of the homes that were close to that soccer field, letting them know that we would have construction and there would be some loud noises during the day. We really worked with our construction firm, J.E. Foster, who did the 2-room addition, and who will be doing our second phase. We worked with them to talk about our drill schedule. What does our emergency drills look like? Where is the evacuation plan? Where are the egress if something were to happen? So we went through all those contingency plans. We did, you know, we work with them as well to be able to preview some of those things for kids. It didn't really impact how we delivered our day instructionally, because we did a lot of thinking ahead and a lot of communication. But we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, whether it's you're a resident within our neighborhood, or a family coming to our school, or kid coming to our school, or the companies that we're working with. They did a great job communicating with their subcontractors on where they could park, where they could have access to the building, when they could have access, working with our alarm company, making sure the site was safe and secure. So they did a really great job of that. There was an open lines of communication. Our foreman was a call or a text message away, and most of the time he'd give me a heads up on when anything new was coming in. So they did a fantastic job. I couldn't ask for a better company to work with. And I'm just glad that they were selected as our Prop R vendor.
Dr. Liberton, as you kind of hear some of that and know that the plans changed slightly and that you will have a fair amount of construction potentially happening towards through the school year, have you kind of given some thought to how you might communicate with students and parents, and then maybe even how you might incorporate students into, like you said, experiencing some of that construction in a safe way?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I've just learned in the last 20 seconds is I'll be calling Dr. Ricker, because I would not have thought of leaflets on doors. So there's things that I do think that's part of this process, is that we're going to rely on each other to get some ideas. I also think that in our building, we're really fortunate that the former district office is part of our renovation. And I have not seen the order of events, but I am assuming that that might be part of the first part of renovations. And that's not part of our building we're used to using anyway. So I actually think we're going to be able to get our toes wet with the construction occurring in a part of the building that we are not used to accessing anyway. And then we'll be slowly able to file over into these brand new pretty spaces, and then go from there. So yeah, I mean, I am excited, but I do think, at least for us, and for this really being the first chance that I've had, at least as a building principal, to experience big construction, I don't know, maybe we're getting it a little easier because the building itself is already there, and it's going to be mostly interior renovations in a part that we're not used to using anyway.
And Dr. Rose, I want to ask you too, oftentimes we do get some of that construction done in the summer, and some of the work that's going to be done on the canopy on your building is going to be during the summer, but our youngest learners are there at KECC through the summer. So are there some opportunities for some of those young ones to kind of see and experience some of that work? And I'm sure they're pretty observant and they notice it, or are there other things that you have to consider as far as making sure our students stay safe?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, construction work at our campus is just like incredible. The kids are at the windows every second if there's machinery and action happening. So highlight of the day. In terms of us and our construction, obviously because we're there 12 months, we have to really phase things in and make sure that, our whole building is accessible in a safe way. So the canopy is going to be done in phases so that our students can always have outdoor time versus working on all of the sides at one time would have eliminated our outdoor space. And we know that having that outdoor play is just in the best interest of our learners. And so like Bo shared, the communication and pre-planning, I think that's key to success. And, we've had just great experience so far with our interior renovations. And then we had a roof replacement last summer. So we had kind of a practice round at working on, closing off sections of our outdoor spaces and, still allowing families and students to navigate the building safely. So we just try to give our families a heads up regarding different entrances and pathways. And so, we just get to take the scenic route and different ways into our space across that time. So I know our staff and our students are just excited about the construction because it just is so exciting for the kids to get to see that and, get to experience it. And, they could literally watch out the window all day at what's happening. So we're thankful for the thoughtful planning though, that, we've had great partnerships in terms of the various projects. And that's been great for us, to be able to remain in session and really, cause the least disruption to our programming and our days for our students.
Thanks so much. Dr. Ulrich, I think that covers all the questions that we've received. So if you want to wrap us up, it's all yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, all of our panelists, senior leadership team, cabinet, for joining us this evening. And of course, thank you everybody in the community that's chosen to join us. Again, the reason that we do these power hours, regardless of the topic, is because we really do want to consistently embrace one of our guiding principles, which is transparency. So again, I appreciate everybody who's been here this evening. One last time, I want to thank the community for their support of Prop R. Without that, we wouldn't even be able to have this conversation. So we're excited to share this news with you and to keep you up to date on the goings on. If you need any additional information, you see the email there on the screen, ksdsuperintendent@kirkwoodschools.org. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great evening.